Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I'm the actor.
And my name's Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh. You know, every time you say your name, you know what I'm dying to do?
What?
I know you won't like it. Every time you say your name, I'm like, Emmy award-winning broadcast engineer. I know you hate it, but that's part of the fun of it. You know,
it is
but
true.
It is like,
it's true.
It is true. You know, and I wondered, like, if I won an Emmy.
Oh, God.
Just the thought.
You would just wear a name tag at all times that has like a little Emmy logo on it, and it says Emmy Award winner Paul James. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, probably.
Emmy Award winner Paul James.
Maybe.
We got to figure out some sort of project to get you into so that you can win an Emmy. But we're not talking about Emmys today. We're talking about Marriage Story, which is, it's when Kylo Ren and Black Widow get a divorce. So that's what happens when, when you put Kylo Ren and Black Widow in a room, and they're just not going to get along. So this movie is written, directed by Noah Baumbach, and it stars Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver, and they play, a couple who at the beginning of the movie is in marriage counseling, but it starts in a different way than I've ever seen. And it also got me with the trailers. Did you see the trailers?
Yes.
And the trailers are essentially the first two, the first scene of the film, just separated into two separate trailers. And one trailer is Scarlett Johansson describing Adam Driver, and the other one is Adam Driver describing Scarlett Johansson, but it's all the positive things, and it's the reasons why they got together. And that's a really cool way to start the film, especially since we know going in as moviegoers what this movie's about, and we know what's about to happen, but we get to see this framing of their relationship and the beginnings of their relationship, and we get to experience why they move into the rest of the film. So yeah, I thought that was really cool, and this movie seems like it's right up your alley, because I didn't know it was like theater director, theater actress, TV actress moving into theater, and artistic integrity, everything. So I could tell that you probably just like stewed in this. Am I right?
100%. I had no idea what it was about either. I knew it was about divorce, and I didn't know how the story was going to be told. I didn't know that she was an actress, he was a director. I didn't know that they were semi well off because of their creative endeavors, if not well off for a young couple living in New York and living successfully, not on the streets. She had a past career and so forth and so on. She comes from an acting family. I knew nothing about it. And I was kind of hesitant to watch it. I'm not a big fan of breakup movies. I'm not a big fan of divorce movies, but going into this movie, knowing some of Noah Baumbach's movies, I was aware that he's kind of into that. Apparently his divorce or his parents' divorce when he was a child has had a strong effect on him. He did The Squid and the Whale, which affected me deeply. It's well done. He did a movie years ago called Kicking and Screaming that I remember seeing, and that's where I first heard his name. But that's like the late 90s, so I really haven't paid attention to his name since, but I have seen quite a bit of his work. So I figured out today, or at least when I was thinking about it today, that I think the reason why this speaks to me is not necessarily because it's a marriage story, a breakup story, a divorce story. It's because it is that fine line between theater and movies. Some of the acting is very stylized in the fact that it sort of sounds like they're giving monologues in a play, and the language is heightened. A lot of people don't speak the way that Scarlett Johansson has this monologue in the beginning when she's talking to Laura Dern. Oh, and it's just it's
that
really
scene,
well done.
We gotta get into that scene.
But it's stylized in a way that it's just heightened just a little bit, where it's not 100% believable dialogue, meaning it is believable and they pull it off, but you can tell it's a written dialogue. At least I can. And I think that's really hard to do. I think it's really hard to make something sound believable that is written in a theatrical way. And they all do it throughout this whole entire movie. And I have high praise for everybody, but I can't say enough about Adam Driver. Not for one split second did I not believe him. I believed everything he did. And that heightened dialogue it sounds so normal when he speaks it. It's like when you see somebody do Shakespeare really well. It's like, oh, that all makes perfect sense to me. I don't know what a baromoticon is, but I now know that it's something you can use to take your life. Thank you. Whoever does the to be or not to be speech well, Mel Gibson in particular, you don't know what the word means per se, but you understand it in context of what they're talking about. And a lot of the dialogue is written in a heightened manner. So you're absolutely right. I hate to say I adored this movie because it's a rough movie. It gets tough. And there's some scenes that I don't ever want to see again. And when I started rewatching it, I was like, ugh. And I know this is the weirdest thing, and we're jumping, and we will come back. But I never want to see the trick-or-treating scene ever again. I don't want to see Halloween in this movie ever again. It's daunting. And it's also encouraging that this is not my life. So I'm kind of glad. But it must be so tough when you're this age and have young children, and what you do if you're bi-coastal and one person wants one thing and one person wants another. It must be daunting. And somehow, just by taking their son trick-or-treating, they show us how difficult it must be to break up a marriage. Just in that one, when there's a young child involved. So there are certain scenes in this movie I don't want to have a thing to do with ever again. And then there's other scenes that are so powerful and so emotionally taught that I literally was slapping myself in the face going, no, I can't do this. I can't, like, it's too much. So yeah, it's right up my alley, and I'm glad I experienced it, but I don't know how much I want it to be in my psyche. I'm glad it's a movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I didn't necessarily. I mean, I knew that it was probably going to have some sort of like Oscar cachet, but and I haven't. I saw Squid and the Whale, and as far as like Noah Baumbach's other stuff and his stuff that he's done with Greta Gerwig, I haven't kept up with it. But at the same time, I understand his propensity for these types of awkwardly set stories. But at the same time, there's interesting choices that he makes throughout, and I'm glad you pushed me to watch this movie, because I probably wouldn't have watched the movie, because it's like you said, it's like I mean, what are we gonna just like show people yelling at each other about how dumb they are and about how they love their child more than the other person? And I mean, you've just seen enough of this kind of vitriolic back and forth, which this film does have some of, but the genius of it is juxtaposing that with we're not seeing a snapshot of a portion of their relationship, and especially a portion of the toxic part of their relationship. We're seeing somewhat of a whole of their relationship, and the complexity of two people living together, being together, sharing a life together, and then, creating a child together and having that responsibility for that child together, but then ultimately growing apart / realizing that, each of them realizing certain new things about the other. And that's what I could kind of see in this film, is that there may have been some sort of like paused maturation of their relationship that they're now reckoning with. And that, I mean, it can be considered a cautionary tale for anyone in a relationship, or I guess people not in a relationship may be like wiping their brow and saying, "Whew, man, glad I'm not dealing with that." But either way, it doesn't mean that it's you're raising your hand, you testify to that, I guess. but either way, I think that the film, I mean, I'm not giving anything away, but I think the film comes down on, no matter how complex relationships are necessary. So I think that ultimately it's a good message, even though it's really, really messy, because life is messy. And I mean, I'm lucky enough to be in a loving relationship. And so I'm able to look at this from, and it doesn't mean my relationship doesn't have any difficulties in it, but that also means that I'm able to look at this from a third party and be like, oh, how similar am I to these people in these situations, and how different am I? And what can I use this to learn? It's a, is it a cautionary tale, or is it a commiserating situation? But I still think that I learned from the film. So it's I don't know. It was worth the watch. And at the same time, I've got to enjoy the performances, and I have many questions about the performances, but I still got something out of them.
The movie is called Marriage Story, not Divorce Story.
Perfect.
Which I find fascinating, which I find really fascinating, because you said something about how these people connect and why they connected and why they got married and all this other stuff. I sometimes think that there's not enough talk about how people they get into relationships, and then 10 years later, they want different things. And it's not necessarily that that person did something wrong or that you did something wrong. And you often hear people talk about people grow apart. I don't necessarily think that's untrue. I think it's good that there are movies out there like this, because it takes, people who have been married, and I have never been married, and I was going to say thank God, but that sounds cynical.
Wait a second.
I have a thing about marriage. I don't think we've ever talked about it, and maybe we can a little bit later on, but I have a thing about it. I'll tell you right now, I have a thing about the pressure that you feel as a single person in this society, that marriage is the ultimate goal when you grow up, and kids are the ultimate goal. And I get why that's a good goal, but it shouldn't be something that is the end all be all. It should be okay to be healthy and be single. It should be okay to be single and have a child and not want to be married. It should be okay. And movies like this, unlike Kramer versus Kramer, that's obviously a divorce story. That's obviously about custody of a child and why a parent does what they do, and why one parent steps up and then another parent comes in and says, well, I know you stepped up, but I want the kid back. That's a completely different story than Marriage Story is. Marriage Story has these small little snippets that indicate why these people were together to begin with. And it also allows you to understand that, if the lawyers and the process didn't get involved, I think it's more of an indictment of the divorce system than it is about an indictment of a relationship, because they both seem to be on the same page with, let's not get lawyers. You have to get litigious when things like this happen, but their personalities would have never changed if they didn't have to do that. They probably would have not come to blows, for lack of a better term, in that epically talked about scene on Twitter. Oh my gosh, that scene has been talked about over and over and over again on film Twitter, if it wasn't for the fact that they had to get lawyers involved. So the point I'm trying to make is that I think it's comforting that this movie is as impressed with why they got together and how they stayed together for such a long time as it is impressed with why they're breaking up with each other. And you don't often see that in breakup movies. You often see the breakup and then the aftermath. You don't see why. And that's why I think the opening sequence is so beautifully done. Although they make fun of it in the movie, and it is kind of, you do kind of get little, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. You kind of get a little cynical about the positive side of her is, and the positive side of him is, but it's important to start the movie off that way because of what happens later on and how that comes back. It's such a great way that comes back too. And then the therapist says, I like to start out like this because I want you to remember why you were together to begin with. And you never see that in divorce stories. You never see that in breakup movies. You always see why you hate each other, or why he slept with her and she slept with him, and she lied about this and he stole money. It's always about what they did to cause the divorce. Well, what did they cause to get each other together? What was the causes, and how well they have grown, at least him in particular, because of being with her. And that's her fight throughout the rest of the film to become who she was always meant to be, either has been stifled or she never really got to develop it because everything became about him. So it's fascinating to watch how people develop in beginnings of relationships versus at the end of relationships. So I feel depressed after Kramer versus Kramer. And I've seen that movie 2 or 3 times, and I don't think I'm going to venture to see it anytime again unless it comes on like at Oscar time and that kind of stuff. But I feel depressed after that movie, even though it all works out. I feel like there's a bunch of unhappy people in this world and they're never going to see eye to eye, even though it all works out in the end of that movie, sort of. But this movie kind of made me feel okay because I realized you're right. Relationships are flawed and life is complicated. And in particular, romantic relationships are complicated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that brings me back to being single.
Well, I think that, when you say relationships are flawed, I would maybe modify that a little bit and say like relationships are complex. I mean, they can be complicated, but complex and complicated aren't necessarily the same thing. But I think that, we should probably start getting into that big meaty scene in the middle of the film, because I knew that it was, I actually paused the movie because I was in a position where I had to go do something else. And I was like, okay, I have to stop this because I know this is the scene. I could just tell that was the scene. But the thing that they do in this scene that's right kind of in the chunk of the middle of the movie where they sit down, it's after they've gotten all the lawyers involved, and then they're sitting down saying like, things have gotten a little crazy. Let's back up, take a step back and see if we can't figure something out without the lawyers. And the thing that they did in this film is a breakup story or a divorce story, the sexy parts or the cinematic parts are the let's yell at each other and tell each other how horrible the other person is. But this particular scene is that, but it starts in one place and ends up in another. Well, it starts in one place, goes to a second place, and ends up in a third place. So that is the inherent motion of the scene, which is, I guess, maybe a little bit more theatrical, would you say, than a movie? Because movies tend to be tend to encapsulate scenes with a single emotion. And it's very rare that you go from 1 to 2 to 3 emotions. And the reason why this scene works so well, and I think the reason why a lot of people are talking about it, is that it starts in an amicable place and it starts in a rational place and it moves into an irrational place to the point where once they start kind of going, trading barbs, I mean, you see it all the time. I mean, everybody's done it. You're in an argument with someone. You're not even listening to or processing what they're saying. You're just waiting to say the next thing. You're waiting to poke at them. And whatever they're saying to you, it doesn't matter how nasty it is. You're not even paying attention to it because you're trying to come up with a better insult or a better barb to throw at them. So that you could tell that's what these characters were doing in that moment. And I think that's realistic. And I think that plays, that transcends across the screen, no matter what screen you're watching it on, which most people are probably watching it on their television because it's on Netflix. I think it was on a couple theaters, but it had to be because it's up for Academy Awards. But still, that's how people are interacting with this film. And so I think that's another benefit. And then Cynical Josh is saying the reason why Adam Driver is getting all of this press for this role specifically is because of what happens, like the kind of like third part of this scene where he just breaks down, because we're not used to seeing men break down like that, and we're not used to seeing a bigger man, especially since earlier on in that scene you kind of see him. She says, "You're acting like your father." Did she say you're acting like your father? Yeah, she says you're acting like your father, and he like comes rushing out of the bedroom, and he is domineering over her, just physically larger than her. And so we're kind of used to that kind of a scene. We're kind of used to that kind of a pairing of man-woman and domineering view on the relationship between a man and a woman. But then he ends up breaking down and just kind of like blubbering on the floor, and she's there to comfort him. And so do you think that's why he's getting a lot of this, or am I just being too cynical?
Well, I don't think that. Why is that cynical though? I'm not sure I'm connecting why you're being cynical.
Because I'm looking at it from an awards, point of view. Like when I don't think Adam Driver did this, but when somebody would read this scene, they'd be like, that's the stuff right there. Yeah, people will be talking about this.
Well, from an actor's point of view, that's never a thought I ever have. I don't think to myself, this is going to be the scene that makes people cry. Now, being in certain scenes recently, and I've talked about this, where I had an emotional reaction to it when I read it, acted it, performed it, and to this day, if I start thinking about it, it starts to happen again because it's so well written. it's impossible not to go there, and I emotionally connected to it. I never thought to myself, well, if I can just get this moment right, people are going to think I'm a great actor and give me an award. I just wanted to make sure the moment was real and true and authentic every night. And that's really difficult to do. I'm not saying that I did that. I'm saying that I felt it most of the time, and I was proud of that. But what affected me the most was the fact that I could actually do it in front of people. You know, the stuff I do in my backyard, the stuff I do in front of people, this instantaneously tearing up thing that happens to me when I talk about something in my past, and it like can start happening now, thinking about it. Could I do that in front of an audience? That was the only outside the actual scene thought that I had. There are moments that I've heard that people, when Monique won the Oscar for Precious, when her husband read that script, he turned to her and said, we've got to get this role. You've got to get this part. This is the type of part that wins people Oscars. And ironically, she ended up winning the Oscar, deservedly so. I don't know if that's the actor's instinct to think that way. And I have heard actors, in particular, Shirley MacLaine, talk about it becomes dangerous when you start looking at a script and start saying, hey, this might get me an award, or this will get me nominated, or this make me look better. It's not about that. It's about the emotional integrity in the scene. So I don't know if any of that happened with Adam Driver in that particular scene. All I know is that they both fulfilled their tasks and their jobs in this movie. And I realized the other day that I was on his side at the end of the movie the first time. But then when I started watching the movie a second time, I realized it's not about sides. It's about understanding how it works together and how they're going to work separately. And all of her scenes are front loaded. There's that scene at the beginning of the movie when they get come back from the restaurant after the play closes, and he wants to give her notes, and the play is closed and they're getting a divorce. They're breaking up. Another actress is taking the part to Broadway, and the director / theater company owner / husband, ex-husband to be, Adam Driver, wants to give her a note about a performance that she's never going to do again. Mm-hmm. The perplexing thing is I completely understood why he had to do that. What's so great is if you watch her very closely, she doesn't want to hear it. Mm-hmm. She doesn't want to know, but she knows that he artistically needs to tell her. And the whole scene, it's going to crush me just thinking about it. Oh, okay. The whole scene is about how she can't cry on stage, and how she knew that if she tried to push it, he would be mad because he doesn't like fake emotions and pushed emotions and over the top emotions. So she said, I thought it would come. It didn't come. So, oh, well. And then he gives her the note, and she says something in between there about, I can't cry on stage. You know that, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, okay, good night. And you think that's it. And she turns the corner and she breaks down because he's not listening to her. He's listening to an actress. It's so much more important for him to get this note out than to notice that she's going to have an emotional breakdown about the fact that she can't have an emotional breakdown on stage. It's devastating. And she's going to get nominated for the Oscar, and it's about time. And I hope that's the scene they show, because it is beautiful. And it's not just because it's a cry scene and everybody thinks it's... No.
What?
No. I know. That's exactly why she needs to be nominated, because it's
Have
time.
you seen Jojo Rabbit?
And she put... No, not yet, but I didn't want to see it.
No.
We talked about this, but everybody
Yeah.
Yeah.
She could get nominated for that. She could totally get nominated for that, in my humble opinion.
They're talking about it. Yeah, they're talking about it. They're going back. This is the one. It has happened before where somebody gets nominated for Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress.
Yeah.
And I think it's even happened in the past where somebody's gotten nominated in the same category. Don't quote me on that. But so it has happened, and I've heard a lot of things about her in Jojo Rabbit. But what I think is happening is, because of what she does in Jojo Rabbit is so diverse, so different than what she's doing in Marriage Story, that people are blown away by it. And since this is a leading part, they're going to lean on the fact that this is the lead actress nomination, and that they're going to they're going to praise her with that instead of a supporting. Who knows? She could end up being nominated for both.
Oh, and by the way, she was in Avengers Endgame this year too. I mean, come on.
And she's great in that too.
She is
I mean,
great
she's
in
really
that.
great in that. I know there's this whole complex thing about cinema and whether or not it's real movies and all that other stuff. I could care
Okay,
less.
Martin Scorsese.
Well, it's not me. It's him. I'm not going to say a bad word about him, but I'm saying that there's an emotional integrity that she brings to every character. And, you know, the scene when they're searching for the Soul Stone is beautiful in Endgame. And I don't care what anybody says. It's beautiful. And the scene when she has a flashback in Age of Ultron is beautiful. That scene with her and Bruce Banner is beautiful because she can act. So back to Marriage Story. What's interesting is that scene that we were talking about at the end, you're absolutely right. It is more theatrical than a movie in script, in the script, meaning you don't get to see these complex emotions ridden through a whole entire sequence. Usually it's just like you see the end of it, you see the beginning of it, you see the middle of it, maybe not all together. So that is much more theatrical. And also the way it's shot and the way that it's in one scene, and it's kind of shot in just kind of two different takes. I mean, there's a bunch of different takes, but it's like two different versions of that room.
Well, it starts on close-ups and then it ends up going to wider shots. Yeah.
Right. Which looks like a stage and it looks like a scene. I think the reason why that's, and it's unfair because they're showing the punching of the walls scene, part of the scene, and people are like, that's overacting. That's not good acting. That's just overacting. What people are not, okay, I'll take that overacting over anything I've ever done in my life, because to me, it affected me deeply. I was breathing so hard after that scene. I don't think I understood what happened afterwards because I don't really remember it. I have seen it since and I do remember it now, but I can't really focus on what happened afterwards because it was so powerful. So your point about it being a beginning, middle, and end of a big scene is the important part. If you watch the end, if you watch the beginning, if you watch just her say in the beginning, give me the note, and then you don't see her turn the corner, you have no idea how hard that is to do as an actor. It's just hard, and they pull it off. Here's what impressed me about Adam Driver. I loved Scarlett Johansson. I loved everybody in this movie. Merritt Weaver, that's a supporting actress nomination waiting to happen. It's not probably going to happen, but that's a supporting actress nomination.
She's one of those actors, we'll put her on the list for me at least. She's one of those actresses who has it, like that. We've done a whole podcast on a long time ago, that like undefined, like she's like not doing the same thing everybody else is doing, but she's just naturalistic. It just comes out of her, whatever she's doing.
Can you imagine the words on the page in that scene where she has to serve him?
Oh God.
I can't imagine how that looked on what's with the pie? Oh, it's pecan. I mean, what? It's brilliantly done. So well done. But back to Adam Driver for just a split second. The things that he does in this movie that impress me, that emotional breakdown is impressive. No doubt about it. It's honest, it's true, it's real. And God knows how many times he had to do that day, or 3 days or 4 days, whatever it is. It's the small things that always impress me more than anything else. There's a scene where he's talking with Alan Alda, and Alan Alda says something to him when they're talking about, well, if you live in New York, but you live in LA, and then you're an LA family, and he goes, but we live in New York. And he's trying to explain it, and he explains something, and there's a moment where Adam Driver gets ready to react, and then all of a sudden he goes, wait, what? Just the way he does that, because it's so complex what Alan Alda is telling him to do, that any normal human being in that situation would not be like, yep, okay, got it, I got it. Because it's going against what his character is assuming is happening, not what will be happening. So he thinks this is going to be gentle and kind and all this other stuff. And then he's perplexed by how much this is going to be more complicated than, and all in that, what? You know, he's not able to process what's going on. When he's leaving Ray Liotta's office, who's great too, by the way, when he's leaving that office and he says, I got to get a plane. And I can by no means afford this, not even close to afford this. He has some line like that. It's almost thrown away the way that he does it, but it's so it's so deep in text and subtext that you can't not notice it. And I know I'm not giving great examples because I would have to actually specifically go, there it is, when you're watching the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But there's these small little things that he does that I don't know if that's on the page and that's what he brought to it because of the way it was written or his interpretation of it. My guess would be, and that's why I'm going to say, unfortunately, will win the best original screenplay.
Mm.
And the only reason why I say unfortunately is because it should be Parasite.
Mm-hmm.
But there are these nuances that Noah Baumbach has written into this script that they're on the page. There's no doubt they're on the page. And to actually have an actor be able to read it, develop it, and then put it out as if it's real dialogue is near to impossible. It's about punctuation. It's about the structure of the sentence. And I don't know if I made any sense out of that, but it's just the small things that Adam Driver does. Now, his emotional outburst at the end is traumatizing. I was rolling with the movie. I was like, oh, they're so good. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, boom, 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 boom. And then you get to that scene. You're like, no, I can't do it. I can't sit through it because it's so real and so believable that I feel wrong watching it. Like that's like if I walked past that apartment and was looking through a window, I would keep walking. I couldn't. You're not supposed to watch people discuss those kind of things. So back to your original question, is that why he's getting all the praise? Yes, but now it's becoming a thing above and beyond just the integrity of the scene. That's starting to bother me. But another thing that's happening is, other than the 3 Star Wars films that he's in, you don't see this breakdown of him emotionally in his movies. You know, he didn't have a big emotional breakdown scene in BlacKkKlansman. He doesn't have those type of things. He's just very believable in what he does. So actually, which we're going to talk about eventually, The Rise of Skywalker, he's so emotionally drenched that now after I saw Marriage Story, I was like, of course he could do that. Of course he could do what he did in Marriage Story. I forgot what he does as Kylo Ren. I mean, he is just powerful.
So he was in Dead Don't Die this year, Marriage Story, Star Wars, Rise of Skywalker, and The Report, which is on Amazon right now. And I have not caught up with that yet, but he's supposed to be really good in that. So he's had a pretty good year this year. Let's talk about Scarlett Johansson a little bit more, because I wanted to kind of dissect that scene with her and Laura Dern, who Laura Dern's awesome. We can move on. So, I mean, we can talk about Laura Dern, but other people have talked about Laura Dern. She's amazing. If you deny that, you should watch Big Little Lies. So,
or anything she's in.
Well, anything she's in, yeah. Except for that one scene in Jurassic Park where she says, "Run." Like that was the worst. Do you remember that?
I can neither confirm nor deny. I accept the fact that you brought up that one moment. So I don't know what you're talking about, Josh.
Good. All right. Great. So there's a scene when Scarlett Johansson is describing her, just kind of like telling her story, I guess, with Laura Dern. And the way that it's shot, first of all, is I have a theory, and I think that if you watch it again, my theory will be borne out, that this scene was shot as one take. Now, there's a camera on a tripod, and it starts with her sitting next to Laura Dern on the couch. And then it ends up her kind of moving into the bathroom because she starts to cry. She goes into the bathroom to get some tissue or toilet paper or whatever and wipe her eyes and kind of blow her nose, whatever. And then she comes back out and then ends up sitting down right in front of the camera in a chair across from Laura Dern. And then she ends up getting back up and sitting back down on the couch. And the only reason why it's not done in one is because every once in a while we have to check back in with the Laura Dern character, with the lawyer, because as an audience member, I totally understand why the editor did this. Jennifer Lame is the editor's name. is that we have to check back in with the Laura Dern character to make sure she's still engaged in the story, because it's a very long scene, whatever, 6, 7, 8 minutes of Scarlett Johansson telling her story. And we need to know as an audience that the lawyer is not literally checking her phone or working on emails or tweeting or whatever. We just need to know that there's that connection between the two characters. And so that's why we have to cut away to, and the shot that they cut away to is just like a straight on shot of Laura Dern, looking at her, and engaging with her emotionally and not verbally necessarily. Well, not verbally at all, really, but just kind of like emotionally engaging with her and saying like, yes, keep going. I understand. I'm absorbing all of this that you're saying. But the fact that I'm pretty darn sure that it is a single shot. It's all from one camera, even though the camera, pans around, tilts, all that stuff. Zoom. It doesn't zoom, but it pans and tilts. I think that's, first of all, it's amazing that Scarlett Johansson can go through each of those emotions, much like she does later on in that scene with Adam Driver. But I think that from a more, I guess, theatrical or from a more emotional standpoint, as a moviegoer, it might have had more impact if you did see it in an unbroken take, because I think it was performed that way. So there's no way for me to prove it necessarily unless we kind of, get Noah Baumbach cornered in a room somewhere and ask him. But I think that that's what they were going for, and that's what they got. And it just shows you the power of an actress like Scarlett Johansson.
Well, it also shows you that we need to pay attention to her in this moment. Yeah. We need to listen to her. And the whole speech is about how he has not listened to her, how she has lost herself. And she makes it, very well known that she can't necessarily blame him 100% because she let herself go, if you will.
They were partners in this relationship. Yeah.
She let herself be absorbed into this relationship, which was his style, his fashions, his furniture, his theater.
But initially she was kind of looking for that, right? Because she was kind of looking to disassociate herself from the things that people like, from the TV stuff that she did, or I guess the one single movie that she did, whatever.
Yeah, which is kind of an indictment about television. And I've never been a huge fan of one medium indicting another one. TV saying movies are bad and movies saying theater is bad and theater says everybody but Shakespeare is bad. I've never been a huge fan of that, but I understand it because I have been enough in those worlds to understand that people do have those hang-ups, prejudices, if you will, that people do think that live theater is the true form of acting, that, film is a director's medium. I understand all of that, but yeah, I think you're right. I think she wanted to take herself away from the superficial world of TV land or movie land and showing her breast and being a teen idol and all that stuff that she's made out to be in the beginning of the film. Well, at least you see that snippet of her one film. So so she's probably attracted to that. And that brings me to my point of what I was talking about in the beginning of the podcast of how it's not an indictment of a relationship. It's an examination of how in relationships we can go one way, we can go another way. It can develop and grow and keep growing, and you live happily ever after as you work on your relationship every day as if it's a job. They forget that part. But you can't really fault the other person 100%. It's not totally his fault because she went along with it. And it probably was intriguing and inviting. And New York is a completely different place than LA. It's got a completely different vibe. And, both coasts make fun of each other in this movie. I love that. The theater people make fun of the movie people and vice versa. And then the movie people kind of make fun of theater people, but sort of say, they've been doing this artsy thing and it's been pretty successful. It's an avant-garde theater and now it's going to Broadway. But what is she doing here? Well, thank God, because she's going to be in our project. We're glad to have her. And even one of those producers, when they're doing that screen test with that fake baby, says, if it wasn't for this divorce, we might not have her. We might not have Scarlett Johansson's character Nicole's character in this project, and they are happy that they do. So it's interesting that he made a movie that's not an indictment of a relationship. It's an exploration of how relationships move and they grow and they shrink and they divide and then they add together. It's complex. And that whole speech in that scene with Laura Dern, she is not blaming him. She's not blaming herself. She's saying this is the way it's going. And once she's pulled away from it and discovered there's a whole nother side that she's missing in her life. And that does happen a lot, you know, in a relationship. Some relationships where you become the other person's world and you forget that you had a world on your own. And, you know, and she says that, and I love that line about, you know, I couldn't tell if it was my taste or his taste, or if it was his taste and I just got used to his taste and I thought it was my taste. I need to have my taste back. I need to do my own thing. And does she want to go back to LA and become an actress? Maybe not, but the money's good. So, you know, does she want to stay in the theater company? Maybe so, but she needs to separate to figure out who she is. And I don't think that's an indictment of him or her or the relationship. I just think that's the way that the world works in relationships. And so it was refreshing that it wasn't this finger pointing thing. And I kind of thought that Laura Dern's character or Ray Liotta's character were going to go down that route where it became a pointing the finger at the other person. And it does to a degree, but not really.
It's more of like a, and she even says at the, you know, close to the end of the film where it's like, oh, well, you know, you actually got like 55% of the custody instead of 50. And then Scarlett Johansson says like, well, I wanted to split it right down the middle. But it was just that, much like Adam Driver needs to give her that note at the beginning of the film, Laura Dern needs to win, even if it's by 5%. Like she did that completely selfishly. And that's because, you know, you've got these two people that are in this relationship, but they got caught up in this system. And this system is its own separate thing. And even though it makes it more complex for them, they're doing it to make it more simplistic to the system. You know, you got to divide these things up. You get the couch. She gets the couch. You don't get the couch. She gets the whatever record player and you don't. I mean, it is a like, this is the demarcation point, and everything on the left side is hers and everything on the right side is his. And we move on and we can close the book on that. And that's, but it's not as cut and dried as that. It's a lot more complex than that. But we see them get caught up in all that.
Well, what's interesting to me is that actually Laura Dern's character, and I think the reason why Laura Dern is becoming noticed for this is because of that great speech that she has about women's place in the world, a woman's place in the world. It's a great speech.
Yep.
It's just really well written and it's extremely well acted. You know, they're slotting her to win the Oscar. She is the front runner at this point.
I didn't know.
And I'm not, yeah. And I like it because it's not this showy over the top role. It's a believable hunker down role. But my point to all that is that there are reasons behind why each camp does what they do. The Scarlett Johansson camp, being led by Laura Dern, is not necessarily about getting 55% or getting half or splitting things down the middle. It's about the fact that it's uneven systematically from the get-go for women. And that we need to recognize that maybe if you get 55%, that somehow karmically readjusts the way society has been treating women systematically since the dawn of time. And that if we don't, you know, women have to dress this way and act this way. But if we act this way in this situation, then we're condemned to be this and we're condemned to be that. If we cry, we're whiny. If we yell, we're bitches, blah, 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 blah. It's about a systematic thing that women are held under. So it becomes about more than just two people trying to separate. It becomes an examination of how we treat people when they separate. And we initially lay blame. And that's why I think it's great that her mother, who's her mother?
Julie Haggerty from Airplane.
Yes. She's so great in this. Yeah. She's so... That scene when she gives him Alan Alda's number is so, but don't tell anybody I gave it to you. It's so great. And she's wearing the John Lennon blue glasses. I love it. It's so well done, and they have a nickname for each other, and
Oh yeah.
it shows that, you know, there are other things at play other than just a relationship medically being, what's your big word, bifurcated,
Mm-hmm.
separated. It's bigger than that. It's more complex than that. And then, you know, you hear about Adam Driver talks about in the big epic scene about how he doesn't think he cheated on her. I guess that's a spoiler, kind of. Well, everybody's seen the scene. It's all over Twitter. Um,
Mm.
it's nauseating how it's all over Twitter to a degree, but I also understand why it's that way. But he says to her, "You stopped sleeping with me." So from his perspective, they stopped being sexual. So he doesn't feel like he cheated on her. He felt like he moved on with somebody sexually, which is a bizarre concept.
Well, no, but I think the key to that scene is that he said you shouldn't be mad that she slept with me. You should be mad that I made her laugh. That's
Yep.
that's his key thing. It's like it's the you know the act of sex is not the thing, is not the betrayal. The betrayal is a connection, that emotional connection that he had with her, with Scarlett Johansson, and now he is transferring over to this other woman who he happens to be the boss of, and that's a whole nother thing. But it's that is the ultimate betrayal. It's not the act of sex, because the act of sex is a byproduct of his emotional connection with her. So I mean, and that's a very prescient thing to say. I mean, it's a pretty deep thing to say, especially for a guy, which you would think would be stereotypically a little bit more focused on the sex part than the emotional connection part. But
Well, that proves our point though. This movie is about the complication of relationships, and that's not a negative or positive thing. They are complex. People are simply complex. Sometimes they're complexly simple and they want basic things, but they are usually complex. And the fact that you even made a comment that you usually don't see men like that is exactly why Laura Dern's systematic thing about women is such an important thing, because we have these images of men and women, and it's ridiculous that a man wouldn't feel that way.
mm-hmm.
And it takes a movie for men to understand that it's okay to feel that way, or that, yeah, I did feel that way. And I find it interesting that we're so complex as humans that when it comes to relationships, it's like when somebody has sex with somebody but doesn't kiss them, they're not intimate. You can't kiss each other. Like I saw, there's some movie out there where they have like an agreement and you can have sex with a part. They have an open relationship.
Six Underground has a scene very much like that. That is that Michael Bay movie with Ryan Reynolds, which is insane. It's on Netflix.
What's it called?
Is Six Underground. It is in the first like 17, 18 minutes
Oh,
of that.
the video game thing?
No, that's Free Guy, which also looks interesting. But
Oh.
no, it's called Six Underground. It's about like this billionaire Ryan Reynolds. He gets a bunch of other people to kind of like help him like take, they're kind of like mercenaries, except they determine who they want to take down. But it's a Michael Bay movie, and the first like 20 minutes of it is just like constant action, and it's crazy, but it's good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But that's him coming off of a bunch of Transformers movies that I could leave. I could say take or leave, but no, I can't take them. I can leave them.
I watch them all.
So that in that movie, we're getting way off track, but in that movie, there was a two people where she was like, all right, let's do this, and then he's like, all right, and then she's like, no kissing, and then he kept trying to kiss her, and then she kept trying to get him
I
to
think
stop.
it's in quite a few movies, actually.
Yeah,
I just
probably.
think it's an indication that what we're talking about with this particular movie, Marriage Story, is that how we deal with each other and all the idiosyncrasies and all of the things that we have as human beings, it's so complex. And the fact that you're right, the intimate part is her laughing at his jokes, or her understanding him enough to laugh at his jokes, not that they saw each other naked. That's not the intimate thing to him. It's just perplexing and complex that it's almost too much to think about. And one could have a whole podcast on how men justify their infidelities in film, because there are millions of men in millions of films justifying sleeping around. And it seems to be a thing. There was a line from a movie, and I think it's Angelica Houston and gosh, who's the actress in the Rocky film and The Godfather? I can't think of her
Talia
name.
Shire?
Yes, I think it's her. And they're talking to an elder lady, and the one of the characters' husband is stepping out, and they're thinking that he does. And the old lady turns and goes, "When I was a kid, my mother told me two things that are true. Your kitchen floor will never stay clean, and men cheat." I was like, oh, okay, that can't be completely factual, but that's what she said. And men cheat. That's what she says. So there's a whole world of films out there where men are cheating and justifying and stuff like that. What makes me not judge him is the fact that I think he honestly was justified. He honestly thinks he's justified because it had been a whole year. She stopped sleeping with him, and that he thought this was just a physical thing with this other woman, and his stage manager, you're right, his
employee,
subordinate. Yeah, his employee. Yeah, you're right. I never even dawned on me, but yeah, you're right. And in his mind's eye, because his wife refused to be intimate with him, that part of the relationship was over with. So it was okay for him to be physical with somebody else because that wasn't happening with her. And that's a whole nother movie in itself. It's crazy.
That's a cop out. No, I don't think that. Well, he obviously didn't meet that conflict head on. He just kind of like did an end around and like was like, hey, well, I'll go over here, instead of consulting with the other half of this relationship. So that's not, I mean, that's more of an excuse. But I do think that he's not making, I think that he's making a point of connecting emotion to the physical sexual act. So that is valid, but I'm not going to give him a pass and be like, oh yeah, he was totally fine, seeking out another woman to laugh at his jokes in the same way that Scarlett Johansson used to laugh at his jokes. That's the betrayal. Like that's the infidelity, because she laughed at his jokes before they got into bed with each other. That she did. So that's the problem. That's the key issue with that particular instance.
Okay, let me clarify something. I wasn't giving him a pass. I was just saying from his perspective.
Sure.
But the other side to that is, and this is a very, very touchy subject, and it's probably going to get me in trouble, but the other side to that is that what do you do? The question is posed in this movie, so we can talk about it. What do you do when somebody completely cuts you off sexually? That's not what do you do. I'm not answering that question, and I'm not saying where I fall and how I feel about that. I think if you make a commitment, I guess I am going to tell you how I feel about it. If you make a commitment, then you stick to the commitment until the commitment's over and done with. And then you're both free to do what you want. So if that means breaking up and moving across the country, or divorcing and moving across country, that's one thing. But you have to be completely disconnected before you start whatever's next. That would be my choice. I'm not saying that's always happened. I'm saying that that's the right thing to do to a degree. I just find it fascinating that Noah Baumbach took a subject that we've seen a million times in movies, men cheating, and turned it into this complex thing. It's only 2 sentences in that scene. And it's amazing. There are 2 perspectives of what that meant. And then what's even more interesting and just devastating is when he says to her, you wanted everything so fast. You wanted to be married. You wanted to be committed. You wanted to be, have a kid. You wanted to do all of this stuff. And I was in my 20s and I didn't do anything wrong. But the fact that I couldn't do it should be something that you feel bad about now.
Yeah. He held resentment his whole life, and it's now coming out. Yeah. That's not on her. I don't know if he
held it his whole life, but it definitely,
that's not on her. If he isn't able to communicate with her throughout their relationship, now maybe it was an immature relationship at the beginning, and maybe they're just now maturing the relationship to the point where they can speak with each other honestly or openly. Well, that's a whole nother problem.
But there is a point to the fact that if she wanted something that he wasn't able to articulate, that he didn't want as soon as she wanted it, and that if the only way to be with her was to marry her and have a kid and so forth and so on, he went with the flow with that. There's no way to talk about this without sounding like a jerk. I don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah,
I know how I feel when I'm watching it. I'm saying but that's a valid point though.
Okay.
That she wasn't hearing him at the time about slowing down. It was all or nothing. And so when you have Scarlett Johansson, who's the best actress he's ever seen, his favorite actress.
And she's not too bad to look at either.
Oh my God, she's freaking sexy as hell. When she's wearing, oh my God, she's sexy.
Even with short hair. I don't know why she has short hair, but whatever.
Yeah, I don't know why. She probably did distinguish her from everything else that she's done. And the way that she fits in her jeans, she's sexy. Anyway, that's going to get me in trouble too. I'm just saying
I think you'll be okay.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be fine. I'll pull out the gay card. Slapped it down. My point is that it's complex, that you can't just say that's not on her any more than anything else is on him and vice versa. There is something to say that he has the right to feel that way, that if it was going too quickly in the beginning and she wasn't listening to him, it was all or nothing. Nothing slowed down. And then the reverse happened. Then it became all about him and all of his needs. And I'm not saying he's right or she's right or vice versa. She's wrong and he's wrong. I'm saying that is an interesting perspective, that it is just in this movie, it is just as much her responsibility to have heard him as it was for him to be heard. So if they were going too fast, he didn't do his job by saying, slow, whoa, I'm in my 20s, dude, slow down. What are we doing? I don't want to have a baby yet. If he wasn't heard. But there is something to be said for when somebody is not listening to you, when you're trying everything in your power to say something. I'm not saying he did. I'm saying that maybe she didn't hear him. And that is a point that is valid.
Just the fact that
I got out of it.
You actually spent however many minutes articulating his point of view just a second ago, and you spent the same amount of time articulating her point of view earlier on in this podcast. That is a testament to how well written this film is. I'm not going to say it should win the Academy Award over Parasite, but I will say that this film is very well written, and the fact that you can pull that from their performances and from the script is a huge testament to this film.
Yeah, I think it's an important movie, and I feel that if you have children and they become teenagers and they start relationships and they're thinking about marriage, I'm not saying that you should say, watch this movie because as a cautionary tale, I'm saying that watch this movie because these are complex situations you're getting ready to put yourself in. And it might not be bad to see all sides of it. Mm-hmm. Although if you showed somebody, it'd probably come across as a cautionary tale. I just think it's so well done that everybody should see it. So I find any justification for showing it to somebody.
Yeah. And I also think that, especially in today's society where like our news, everything that we get is all being like codified and being boiled down to a very essential piece, something that you can either read in 5 seconds or view as a YouTube video for 1 minute. This movie is the opposite of that. This movie is messy. It's complex. It has different sides. It doesn't have a good guy. It doesn't have a bad guy. It has just nasty stuff inside of it. And if you spend this 2 hours and 15 minutes with this film, you get to stew in the complexity of emotions, relationships, and you maybe hopefully understand that people are complex. Relationships are difficult, but hopefully by the end of the film, which you didn't even really talk about the end of the film, but hopefully by the end of the film, you realize that an emotional connection is worth it, is worth all of this complexity. So what did you think about the end of the film with him sitting down with his son and reading what she wrote about him? Because he never really heard that. We heard it in a voiceover at the beginning of the film, but he never heard that. Did it get a little dusty in the room when you were watching it?
Yeah. I mean, of course. I mean, it's just like goes without saying. I mean, pretty much. But I found it beautiful. I thought this is what the son's going to remember.
Yeah.
The son's not going to remember. Well, he's going to be affected because obviously, the director and writer has had a career based on being affected by his parents' divorce. He'll be affected by it, but it's good to hear your parents saying nice things about each other in general. So if it was, and it was so innocently done, he didn't even really know what it was when he first found it. So I think that's the lasting memory, because there's a lot of moments in the movie where you're thinking, oh no, that kid's going to be affected by this. Henry is the son's name. When Adam Driver's talking on the phone trying to find lawyers and he drops his hamburger, that's what the son is going to remember. Because even the son says, why did you want to hang out with me? When you didn't have time for me. And then, I want mommy, not you. There are moments where that the son has been affected by it. So it's nice to end the movie on a note, literally a letter about why their parents had him to begin with, how they got together, and what was beautiful about each other. And out of that came him. Yeah. Out of that came the son. So that's a beautiful moment. It really is it really is well done.
All right. Well, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to actually quote the description on IMDb of this film and say that it's amazing, because it is. Noah Baumbach's incisive and compassionate look at a marriage breaking up and a family staying together. That's it.
Oh, that's good. I didn't read it.
Yeah, me either until just a second ago. That's it.
Good.
So that's how we're going to end it. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and you can see us on YouTube, which we have over 1,100 downloads of our Parasite podcast. So we're coming up on YouTube. You can listen to our Parasite podcast on YouTube, or any of our podcasts on YouTube also. Check us out there, and we'll see you next time.